Hello and welcome to all you TLBTV viewers out there. This is Write the World with your host, Lorana Hoops. The show is brought to you by TLBTV and the Liberty Beacon Project. And of course, this is the show where we speak to all sorts of different authors and writers from wonderful different genres. We talk all about the writing process. And of course, we give you some great books that you need to look into. And my guest today is not only a fellow author, but I am privileged to now call her a friend. And this is Jenna Brandt. How are you today, Jenna?
I'm doing really good.
Good. I'm doing really good as well. I'm busy. But, I saw a quote from Ted Dekker today, and I'm not sure how it had started, but he said, the way to write a book is you finish a novel, and then you start another one, and you finish it, and then you start another one, and you finish it. And I feel like that's my life right now.
Yeah. Or am I trying to get stuck in a novel? Like, I'm kind of in that weird spot. I'm kind of stuck in the one I'm working on, but hopefully I'll get past it. So
Yes. Yeah, I don't like that getting stuck part. But you helped me get through my stuck part, so I'll help you get through your stuck part, and it'll be great. We'll get there.
Yep.
Yeah. So let's talk about you. So let me give the readers a little bit, or the viewers, I should say, a little bit of background. So Jenna and I actually met through Facebook. Of course, authors are all over Facebook, and we like to share ideas because I think this is one of the few occupations, kind of like teachers, where we're like, don't recreate the wheel. Here's what worked for me. Go out and try it, And I think that's really great that authors are willing to help each other that way. And that's how Jenna and I found each other, is through a Christian authors chat room. And once we started talking, we realized that we had a lot in common with the way we write. And we live really close to each other, not super close, but we're on the same coast, which is pretty cool. So
we can at least talk at the same time.
I know, right? So I'm not having to be like, wait, what time is it where you are?
Because I have a couple of bloggers that do reviews for me, and they live in Australia and in UK. And so that's sometimes I'll get really weird emails from them in the middle of the night and stuff like that. So I had to turn my notifications off so I wouldn't have it all night long.
I have to do the same thing because my phone will just ding and I'm like, I should check that. No, I'm too tired to check that. Wait, I really need to know if that was important. I'll check it.
Yeah, I purposely set a night shift on mine so that you just wouldn't do it, because I'm the same way.
So smart. Yeah. All right, so let's talk about your books. You have the Window to the Heart saga out now, and there are 3 books out currently. Now, was this your first, before we talk about the books themselves, was this your first introduction to writing, or did you do writing before the Window to the Heart saga?
So I did writing, but I didn't necessarily do novels. Well, I've always been writing. I wrote short stories and stuff. Since I could hold a pen, I wrote little short stories. I was telling somebody recently that I have up in my warehouse binders full of, back before they had computers that were common, I had binders of notepads with and I'd make my own books, I think I was young when I was 8 years old. And it's horrible, but it's great because I have them and it's funny to look back at them. But most of them, it was sequels to movies I liked, which was super funny. They didn't have a sequel. And so I wanted to have a sequel to Goonies. So I'd write a sequel to Goonies. So I was that kid. I would write the sequel. I didn't have one.
My son does that, only he just rewrites the movies. He watches the movie and he loves it. And so he just rewrites it into his own book.
He's like, it needs this, this, and this. So I'm adding it.
Yes. I used to do those short stories as well, and mine are all on notebook papers stapled together. And it's so funny because now I'm an English teacher, but back then, when I was 8, I didn't really spell very well. And so it says pictures, Pitchers, pictures by, and I was like, oh God.
Oh, yeah, no. Don't go back and critique your own stuff from when you were young. You're like, oh my gosh. Yeah, so no, I wrote, so I've been writing forever. I grew up around writing. I'm a 4th generation writer. My grandma wrote, my great grandma wrote, I have one of her poems from the turn of the century. And my mom was actually a journalist for 10 years for a pretty sizable paper here in California. And I grew up literally sleeping in a sleeping bag under her desk at the office at the newspaper while she was under deadline. So, and I actually wrote for the paper. I was hired, they had it at that time, which was so cool. And I think they totally need to bring it back. They had a teen section and they paid you to interview other local teens that were like doing amazing things. Like I remember interviewing someone that was on Star Search, if you remember what that was.
Oh my
Yes.
gosh,
And
that's
so I did
awesome.
that, and I got to review movies, and it was like the best because they paid me to go to the movies, and I got $10 a story, and I got my name in print. So it was like the best thing ever. You know,
Nice.
not like a lot, but back then that was a lot of money in the
Right. Yeah.
80s.
Now we're
So
like $10 doesn't pay for anything, but
doesn't even pay for the movie anymore.
I know, it's so sad.
But
Gosh.
back then, that was a big deal. So, like I said, I have a blog. I had kind of taken a back burner for a while, but my blog has been featured on ABC News and Good Morning America and the Mighty website. I'm actually a regular contributor for them. So my blog picked up a lot of traction. It's about loss and grief. And I'm very open about this. I lost my husband and I lost our son to SIDS 3 years ago. It's almost 3.5 years now. And so my blog was about that. And a lot of people don't talk about that. And it plays very heavily into the style of writing I do and the emotions I put in my characters, because I can empathize a lot and create characters that people can relate to, because if they go through a lot of my characters go through hard things, which I think all of us do. So it kind of gives them that flawed or hurt place to come from, which I think is very relatable, rather than a perfect character. Because I find perfect characters boring. I'm like, I don't want to read about a person that's like has a perfectly charmed life. That's just not my thing. So I don't tend to write that way, although that's probably what sells better. But that's not what I write. So
I think it kind of depends. I think there is a line between too perfect, and then a line between too realistic. And so we kind of have to
too messed up. Yeah. You don't want to. Yeah, as a Christian, you have to be careful, not to put too much in. So
That's true. That's true. And
I'm still
Christian
working on that line.
is harder. Yeah, because people want them to be real, but they also want like that super sweet, happy ending kind of thing. At least that's what I'm finding from looking at other really successful, inspirational romance authors. I'm like, okay, kind of.
You and I are both kind of figuring that out through our first series. Even my fourth book's going to be very different than the first three. And I think
Right.
that's okay, because even though they're in the same world and they're in the same genre and based on one of the characters from those books, it's a totally different heroine. So she's going to react totally different and be a very different person. And so it was actually a nice evolution, because I learned a lot of the same things you learned. And so the first three books are a little bit more on, I would say, the edgier side of Christian fiction, and my fourth book is going to be more towards the mainstream of Christian romance. So it's kind of just like an evolution, and it actually lends itself that way because just how the character is, how my main character is. So
I think that's so funny because I feel like my fourth book did the same. Like it's still in my Heartbeat series, and it took a character from book two, but it feels very different for me. It feels.
I've read a bunch of yours, and I love it. I love your fourth book, and
Yeah.
I love them all. I love them all individually, and they're all amazing. But yeah, I can see that. Yeah, we both see we're like right on the same track. That's why we mesh so well together.
It's so true. It's so true. And it's nice to have someone that you're like learning along the way. And I think all authors do that. They grow as they figure out what people want and, their own writing style. Even when I look back at the first edition of the book I wrote, I thought was great. And then I look at it now and I'm like, wow, I have grown leaps and bounds in writing, 5 or 6 books. So I think that's always a good evolution.
And that's what my book did. So these aren't even really, they're the first printed editions, but there were earlier versions. So there's 3 of them, and you can look at the thickness of them. That was one whole book at one point.
Oh.
And I queried a literary agent, and she was super nice, amazing Christian literary agent. And she said, okay, the book premise is amazing, but girl, you need to cut this up. It is way too big. And she's like, no one's going to sit down and read that. That's going to be too overwhelming for the average reader. Because, I'm obsessed with like the old school C.S. Lewis and the old Gone with the Wind and very like huge sweeping long books. But that's kind of, people don't read that way as much. I'm not saying nobody does, but it's a lot less than there used to be. And so she said, but you already have it built in. The first section of the book takes place in England, and the second one in France, and the third one in America. She's like, just make it a trilogy. And I was like, oh my gosh, it was like this light bulb went off, and I was like, oh my gosh, I could totally do that. So that's kind of mine evolved. So the first, and I have the original editions from a long time ago, and there's even like revise. We're always revising. Even when you find your books, they're print, you still find things like, oh, maybe I should have done this, or maybe I should have done that, you know? So I don't think
so true.
we're ever 100% happy with anything we put out there.
But I think that's one of the really cool things about indie publishing, is because, one of my books is with a publisher now, and it was an interesting experience. I'll say that part of it has been good. Part of it has not been so good. But one thing that I really have found, other than I can't track my sales, which drives me crazy. But one thing is, like you started reading it and found more typos. And I know that my publisher is great in this area, that they will go back and they'll do another edition, but when I indie publish, like if I look at it and I'm like, oh, I want to add this scene in, like I can go do that, and then I can just put a note in that it has an extra scene or something. Or if a scene doesn't read well, I can take it out and I can, put those notes in. And I think that's something that's really cool that we can do as indie publishers that traditionally people can't do, because most traditional publishers, once it's out, they don't go back and make changes.
No, they have to have an extensive list, and it'll be a while. I've heard sometimes months to years before they'll put out another edition of it. Yeah. And I understand that it's very but now between ebooks and print on demand, it's super easy to update that stuff. And so, yeah, I agree with you. I think that's one of the perks of, of being an indie author versus doing a traditional route. And we've talked about that. There's different perks to different directions. And I think there's more of a shutout with awards when you're an indie author versus traditional publishing. They're like, oh, well, we want this and we want this as proof. And it's like, I've sold, I feel, a substantial amount of books, but yet because of the amount, they want like an absorbent amount to prove that you're an author. And I'm like, but you could I've thought about this logically. You could have a traditional publisher pick up your book, and let's say you sell only 500 copies, because that can happen. Right. You're still considered a published author. Like I've done 4 times that. So that doesn't make a lot of sense to me how that would equate, because I feel like it should be based on how many books you sold, not necessarily. And sometimes, like with us, we're new authors. So like my first book, I have it at a very reasonable price. It's never going to do a huge amount of money, because it's the one that I want everyone to read to get into my series, see my style of writing, and then they'll pursue the other books, which are set at a normal price. Right. And I still keep those. I still keep those lower than a lot of other authors, because I want people to really feel like I'm accessible. I'd rather have thousands of people reading my books than a few hundred if I'm lucky, because the price point's too high. I want it accessible. So absolutely. I really thought hard about the pricing for that reason. And yeah, like I am, so I know you think about it too.
I agree with you, because, just because a traditional publisher picks up your book doesn't mean it's going to sell. You're still required to do your own marketing under a traditional publisher. And, they help out a little bit. Like my publisher takes it to fairs and stuff that I can't get to because they live on the East Coast. And so that's kind of cool. But other than that, like the rest of the marketing is still all me. And so, yeah, that doesn't really make sense.
And they take a huge chunk. I mean, yours isn't that bad, but I've heard of some that are really, really bad, where like you're making peanuts and you've done all the, and sometimes it doesn't even turn well. And you hear about all these awful stories about buying back your book and things like that, or someone that they couldn't ever get their rights back because they didn't read their contract good enough. And that stuff all scares me. And I feel like that is the one thing as an indie author that we have. It's for better or for worse, you have all the control. So you have to put in all the work, but you have all the control. So, it's time consuming, probably more than going through a traditional publisher, but you have more control. So I don't know. I guess it depends on how some people just want to write it and turn it over. But like you said, that's kind of tricky, because you think that's what's going to happen. They do for the first release time, but then eventually it gets put to the back burner when they have new releases anyway. And I've heard from some traditional authors that they end up having to do a ton of their own promotion as they go further along once the book isn't new anymore. And so I was like, well, then you're doing the same amount and you've given up a huge chunk of your royalties to them. So I don't know. Yeah. I see the benefits both ways. So
I think one day I'll do a whole show on it, but having done one book with a publisher and a couple books without, I have found that I don't like to give up much control. I don't like giving up that much control. And so I think if you are a new author and you're really unsure of what to do, maybe it's worth it. But I think if you're like me and you've done 4 or 5 books and you figured out pretty much how to do everything. I mean, I don't create my own covers, but everything else I do, then I don't see the need for a traditional publisher anymore. And that was sort of a thing that I took away when I did publish.
You're formatting yourself now. I mean, it used to be that it was extremely difficult, but like we've talked about it, my favorite software in the whole wide world is Vellum, and now Vellum released print. And so like, I don't even have to go look for someone to do print for me, because that used to be really expensive to get your book into print. You had to go get it specially formatted. Now you can do it all yourself. I don't do my covers either, because I tried. It didn't turn out so well. So I kind of,
no, I don't.
That's not my cup of tea.
I don't have that artistic thing, but yes, if you have a Mac, Vellum is fantastic, and I'm super jealous of Jenna's Vellum because I don't have a Mac. If you are like me and you don't have a Mac, I recommend Pressbooks. It's a little bit more expensive than Vellum because she can pay a flat rate and all of her books get done for that rate, whereas I have to pay a rate for every book. And so once I've hit 4 books, I've paid what she can do now forever. I'm now having to pay on top of that. So if you have a Mac, do Vellum. If you don't, though, Pressbooks is pretty good. You can get the discount, and
I've heard good things about it. So
yeah, it's super easy, and it will give you EPUBs and Mobies and prints, and that's what I really like about it, because I don't have to worry with any of that. And if I need to go in and make changes, I make changes, and I download a new EPUB or a new Mobi, and so that's really, really helpful. All right, so let's talk about your books. Let's get into your books. So where did the idea for Margaret come from? Because Margaret is your heroine.
Yes, she is. And hold on just a second. That's my husband coming through, but he's going to be quiet. Okay. So every time, right? Never fails. But every time. The kids this time. So, so hey, you need to be quiet too. Every time you talk, she has to have this edited. Sorry. Okay. So anyway, back to this. So back to the books. So where Margaret came from was she was a short story, and I wrote it and I read it to my dad. And when I read it to him, I realized I really liked the short story and I really liked her. And I decided I wanted to write a book about her. And then the book kind of generated into this like huge novel. It was, I guess, technically short enough to be a novella. And then it turned into a novel, which turned into like a 3-part series. So, yeah, that's kind of how it happened. And I'm so used to writing about her that I catch myself in my 4th book, who's a totally different heroine, has one of the characters from the previous books, but it's a totally different heroine. I sometimes will write Margaret. I'll be like starting and I'll be like, Margaret did it. I'm like, wait, this isn't about her. And I have to like erase it and go back and put Emily. So it's super weird to be writing about somebody, because I've written about her for so long in my books that it feels super weird. I like feel like I'm not being faithful to her a little bit. I'm like, wait, I know, right? But it's like people want to hear about other characters. I'm like, I feel like it's time. And I can always go back to her, because the end of the 3rd book doesn't end like in a way that it couldn't be continued. Someone even asked that. They're like, are you going to continue it? I'm like, maybe down the road, but like I want to do something different. So that's why I feel like it was a good time to transition and write about something else. So.
Well, and I think too, I really love Margaret, but that poor woman needs a break. So I think it's good to like take a break from her.
And good one. It'd be a good story. She'd have a happy,
right. That's what I'm saying.
Completely 100% happy.
Yeah, she doesn't have to have any more tragedy. It could just be like, hey, here's how she's doing 5 years down the road, and everything is great.
Maybe I'll write like a nice little novella to make everybody feel so happy for her. I was thinking that
would be fantastic. That's actually a really good idea, because
maybe be my Christmas novella. Maybe, I don't know.
Nice.
We're like,
we'll talk about
like spawning ideas right now, aren't we?
We are. It happens every time. Okay, so Margaret starts out in England. And one thing I had to remind myself when I read your books is she's very young. Because I remember when I read the first book and I was like, man, this woman just kind of irritates me. Like, she's so stupid sometimes. She makes really stupid decisions. And then when we talked, you reminded me that she was like, 16 in the first book, right?
It starts with her 16th birthday, her coming out celebration. And not only was she just 16, a lot of girls by that point had coming out balls at like 14 in that era. And so they're very mature, but she wasn't. She was sheltered. Her dad, because of circumstances, she was her dad's only living child, and he had spoiled her and given her everything she wanted and kind of like kept her, secluded from everything. And so her her ability to probably interact with people wasn't very good. I mean, her best friend's a servant. Come on. I mean, that's not great when your best friend is your servant, because like they can't really not, they can't really be honest with you.
Your friend.
Exactly. It doesn't make sense. Like, so that's how sheltered she is. It's like, she doesn't have any other friends. Like my current heroine, she has a best friend that's not her servant, so it's like a totally different, you know what I mean? Like I think about that and I think that's so funny. I'm like, yeah, that's super weird. I can't even imagine like having that kind of life where like, yeah. So yeah, she's very young, and I feel like that's why there's so much growth in her, is that she is a very because of that. So I don't know, my daughter ran past me and it distracted me. Sorry. She was supposed to stay out of the room, but you know how it is. So yeah, I feel like that's just how she is. And I think that's what's cool about her. She does evolve so much through the series, significantly, not only through what happens to her, but just by age and becoming, it's no secret, she becomes a mother through the series and all of those things. I mean, we have children. We know how it is. You become a very different person once you have kids. And so that all changes her. And yeah, so I wanted to show it off, but that's my cover for the first one. So since we're talking about the first book, and I'm pretty excited.
I do love the first book's cover. I think the cover of the first book might be my favorite, but the third book itself was my favorite book. Like I loved all of them, but the third book itself was probably my favorite book.
That's the third one, The American Conquest.
Yeah.
So I feel like I love that each one of them really captures the style of the book, and then there's the second one. So like, you can tell that's Parisian and French, and the third one looks Westerny and rugged and American, and the first one looks very upper crust English. And so I like that. I like that there is a definitive, and I, even though I didn't do my covers, the person I worked with, Alexia Purdy, who's amazing, she's a personal friend. Like we said, we all like to help each other. And she doesn't traditionally do romance. And I didn't want a traditional romance cover anyway, so it kind of worked itself out. And I actually picked the pictures. I was like, these are the pictures I want, and this is kind of the style I want. I want it to be like this. And then she designed everything else, and it turned out amazing. So, and I didn't know anything about doing wraps or spines or any of that. And so she did the wrap and the spine for the prints. And she did an excellent job. So
that's definitely the hardest part. You and I both have found some great programs where you can easily do ebook covers and they look pretty good, but trying to do the wrap, you have to have a professional. It just doesn't work without it. And to get a good looking cover, you can do it.
Yeah. But you want to hear weird things she told me, and I didn't know this. So I misordered my third book. I ordered my proof and I got it, and I was like, the wrap's off. I'm not sure why it's off. So I sent her a message. I'm like, hey, my wrap's off. What do you think it could be? She's like, well, did you make sure to put cream colored? And I'm like, I don't know. And I went back and looked, and nope, it was my error. I put white. Well, apparently white pages are thicker than cream pages, and I did not know that. That's a super weird thing, but they are. And when I reordered it in cream, so I just gave that copy to my daughter anyways, because she wanted a full set anyway. So I gave that one to her, but the cream, it fit. So that weird little thing, and how would you ever know? I would never know that as an author. And and weird things like genre wise, like generally you use cream for fiction, and they generally use white for nonfiction. I didn't know that either. She told me that, and I was like, learn all these like little things that you just would never know. And so like if I was designing it, I probably would have botched it all up. So it was really good that she told me.
I didn't know that there was a difference in the thickness, but I did know when I was trying to fix the wrap on my A Father's Love. There were two different templates to download, and I thought, well, that's kind of weird. Why does it matter? Like,
well, now you know why.
Now I know why. That makes total sense now. But I just like,
I gave you some new information
to read better. The white and black is so glaring for some people that I was really happy when they came out with cream, because it's a little softer and it reads a little better, but I had no idea they were thicker. That's interesting. You do learn something new every day.
And it really did, because I'll show you on here what it was. Right along here on the edge, the seam was over this way. So you had this glaring, like bright blue seam that wasn't supposed to be there, and it looked really bad. And I was like, oh. And when she told me, and I was like, oh, well, now I learned something. I did not realize it. Because she did ask me when I was telling her the page count, she's like, and what color? And I thought, that's a weird question. So I told her the color I thought it was, but apparently I clicked the wrong color. And that's what made the problem. Thank goodness I didn't order all my author copies. Can you imagine? You get a stack of them and they're all wrong. That would have been awful. So
yeah. And, you know, even though Create Space is slow, I will recommend to people, like, order a proof. Look at it before you order a whole bunch of them, because you can't return them once you get them.
Yep.
But look at it and make sure it's what you want. You know, matte versus glossy cover. You and I have had this discussion, but I don't personally like matte covers on my books. And I ordered a matte cover one time and I was like, oh, I don't really like matte covers on my book. And so I always order glossy, but you know, some people like the matte covers on the books.
And I think it's genre too. Like on a historical, see, this is matte. I think it looks really good on a historical. They lend themselves to look old. And so I feel like the matte pulls really well on that. And I know my friend, she's a young adult paranormal. The paranormal and that type, they tend to do matte too. So that's the other thing people don't know, is that sometimes it's genre specific. Sometimes it's author specific, sometimes it's genre specific, and sometimes you just do what you want. So it's like whatever you want. But yeah, so she kind of told me, is like, yeah, she told me that a lot. She's like, look at the covers of what you like and what you don't like. And so we spent a lot of time figuring that all out, and I'm very happy. And she's going to continue to do the covers for the series. So, and then I got a new cover designer for whatever I do in the future. So we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah. That's the hard part. Finding a cover designer that you trust, because you want someone who is going to work with you and who's going to take your, you know, suggestions of what you want as the author, but then, you know, someone who's willing to make some things, if you look at it and you're like, that's not quite what I was expecting, and somebody who knows how to put colors and fonts together. Because I have seen some, you know, probably pretty talented people in some areas, but when they put it together, their fonts are too busy and they've got like super busy pictures going on and you can't read it, and you're like, well, I kind of feel like I need to throw up after looking at this cover. So yeah, I
think that's the worst thing, is that when they look unprofessional. And I hate like the ones that, because like I said, I looked at a lot to see what I wanted and what I did not want, is the ones where it looks like they just took pictures and layered it in Photoshop. And like, so that, because their book's about a baby and a mail order bride, so they smack a photo of a mail order bride and then they smack a baby in front, but the lady's not even holding the baby. And then like, I saw one, it was like a cat and a dog on a photo with a lady and had like some weird background. And I was like, how do they look at that and not realize that that doesn't look professional? And frankly, I feel like next to your synopsis, your cover is the most important thing. And I honestly feel like it's the most important thing, because that's what they're going to look at first. And if they like that, they're going to read your synopsis. If they don't like your cover, they're not going to read your synopsis. And then you're not going to sell a book. So yeah, I don't understand the thought process on that. Maybe they feel like they don't want to spend the money. But like, I mean, honestly, you can get a really nice cover for between $100 and $150, and a lot of times that includes the wrap, and then you have it forever too. So if you're I feel like if you're planning to be it depends, I guess, if you're trying to be an author or if you're just trying to put a book out. And like, I know you and I, we want to eventually, our goal is to make this a career where we don't have to do anything else. And so if that's the case, then I want every book cover I want it to look professional. I want my books to be edited professionally. I want that quality to be high, because I don't want I don't want to grow readership and then throw them off with like something that doesn't match with everything else. So
and you know, even I think 100 to 150 when you get established is really reasonable. I didn't have that when I started, so you know, I went to Fiverr, and I was super lucky, because I've heard some horror stories about Fiverr, but I was super lucky to find some really talented people, and I got my covers for like $25, and they look really good.
Which ones?
The first three, well, actually all four of the Heartbeats series. Those were all done.
Well, you got us.
Those are
amazing. I love those covers. So yeah,
I know. So
I learned something from you, but now I have to. Yeah. But they leave sometimes, right? Because you told me she's no longer doing covers. That's where.
Yes, the one who designed the first four, I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden I went to contact her, and Fiverr told me that she wasn't designing anymore. And I was like, no.
Yeah, because I was
I worked
like,
with different.
yeah, hook me up for my next series. Because my person who's doing my series, she's gonna she said she'd do the life of my series, but she's kind of trying to move away because she's a writer too, and if it takes up a lot of her time. So she said she wants to focus more on her writing. So I told her I totally
Yeah,
understand, and so she's being amazing just to finish out my series, because I know I'm doing at least 2 more books in the series, and then
awesome.
yeah, so I have four I'm working on. 5 I have the plot ready. I'm probably going to be delaying it till January because we're both involved in a couple projects coming up, so that's going to take up the rest of my year.
We are. So before we move on to those projects, and I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this, but I think it's really important. In your third book,
Mm-hmm.
you have this really hard scene to read, and I know that it has. You've had some readers who have balked about it. And you and I had this discussion about, do you take it out? Do you leave it in? Do you take it out? Do you leave it in? And you decided to leave it in. And I totally respect that decision and give you props for that. But my question is for advice for other people who go through the same thing is how do you reconcile, readers' low reviews? Because you've had a few come in based solely on this one part, not your book, because your book itself is fantastic.
Yeah, no one's saying it's
but
badly written or that I mean, you'll get the occasional. I had someone say that they didn't like the flow. You get weird things from people, but overall, everyone feels the books are well written. I've never had any criticism of the actual quality of the books, I guess would be the best way of putting it.
No, and I've read all of Jenna's books, and I can attest to the quality of the books. They're fantastic. But for authors who are out there, because I think it is really important that you stay true to the story that you were inspired to write. And that's really where you finally came down to. You were like, I feel like this was what God told me to write, and this is why I'm going to leave this in. But then how do you reconcile it as an author? How do you, okay, you have these reviews and nobody wants to get, lower reviews that hurts, they hurt your heart, versus this is the story that I really feel needs to be told. So I guess advice, what would you say?
The few things that I've learned is, one, I had to reconcile. I think it came in harder because I had expected it not to have because the biggest complaint about my first 2 in the series was that they didn't have a traditional happily ever after. They didn't leave on a sad note, but they didn't have they got married and they lived happily ever after. It didn't have that. And the third book does that. Her and the person she's up with, they have a happily ever after, and everything rectifies at the end of the book. And I feel like it's a very good, happy conclusion. So I thought, okay, everyone's going to get the happy ending that they wanted. So this book's going to do super well, maybe better than all the other books, right? And it is selling well. It's selling equal to 2, which is what I would expect because of the price point. My book 1 always has done better just because it's 99 cents. And I knew that. You're always going to sell more of the ones that are really reasonable. And the goal is to hopefully, and 2 and 3 have been steady and they've been doing very well. But when I got it was pretty quickly that I got one of the first negative reviews. And I was very shocked by it. And the person had read and reviewed the previous 2 books and had left good reviews, not perfect, but good reviews. And I thought, well, that's odd. And I was actually able to find this reader and I was able to reach out to them. And she just said it was too difficult for her to read. And she even wrote in the book that it was really well written and that she liked the book, but for her. And I think that either 2 things are going on with my book. I think that people have dealt with similar circumstances or known someone that has, and maybe it's just too much for them. Or 2, they want to live in a world where that stuff is not brought up and they don't have to deal with it. And I think that's what's going on. I think in the Christian community, we have a tendency to kind of put our heads in the sand and not want to deal with things. And I noticed that a lot of Christian readers want sweet, perfect, happy, like we just talked about, no problems, everything's perfect, no controversy. You and I both write about, or at least our first series, my first 3, your first 3 had a lot of tougher subjects. And I think so the way I got through it is I finally got to a place where I had to reconcile that it was going to be a polarizing book. People were either going to love it or they were going to hate it. And I had to stand behind it. And at the end of the day, because you asked me that, you go, well, it doesn't necessarily affect, you could take it out and the book would still be okay without that in there. Well, yeah, the book would still be okay, but would it be as powerful? And that is what happened to her. And if that's what God told me happened to her, even though she's a fictional character, it's meant to help somebody. And I have a friend who teaches she teaches self-defense and things like that. She's a fellow Christian friend of mine. She told me, I think your book's going to help people. It may be hard for others, but it's going to help some people that have been through maybe not exactly that, but similar circumstances. And they're going to be able to relate, and it's going to be able to help them. How Margaret was able to not only come through it and not be bitter, but become a better, stronger person, Christian, mother, wife, and how her and Court's relationship, that's her, the person, the main love interest in book 3, how their marriage is strengthened. And I feel much better and stronger because of how he loves her through it. He's so patient and faithful and doesn't, get angry with her. And I think that's so powerful. And I felt like if I took that out, it would diminish that. And so I gave it to God, and that's all I could do. I prayed and I said, God, I'm going to leave it. And if it tanks, it has not, it's still sitting at a 4.1, which I think is still really good. But if it tanks and it drops to 2 or 3, then I just have to know that that's what you gave me and you'll get me through it. And then I just focus on the next book. And I talked with my mom about it and my husband about it, and every single one of them were like, you can't, if this is what God has told you. And my mom's read the book, and I've had several other people that have read the book, and they're like, I feel like if you do that, I asked a lot of people, and my street team, and I said, I want your honest opinion. And the vast majority said, we like it the way it is. It is hard. No one is arguing the fact it's hard, and that section isn't difficult, but because of that stronger conflict and that stronger situation and that harder tragedies that she goes through makes the restoration and the redemption part of the story stronger. And I always relate it back to, I love Francine Rivers' Redeeming Love. I don't know if you've ever read that. Have you ever read it?
It sounds familiar, but I'm not sure that I have.
A lot of people read it. It's got like over 1,000 reviews on Amazon. It's one of the she's probably one of the most well-known Christian historical romance writers out there. And she was actually a secular writer before she was saved. And she was a bestseller at that time too. And her book is very much like that. She deals with, she's in a whorehouse. I'll just be really honest. My book's not like that. But what I'm saying is it's a very controversial topic. And it's about her story and her redemption and how she struggles, and it's not perfect. And I feel like that that's, we all do struggle, and we all are flawed, and we all have things happen, and we all make bad decisions. And some of Margaret's problems are brought on by herself, and some of Margaret's problems are done to her. And I think that's me. I've done things to myself, and I've had things done to me. So I feel like I just made the decision, okay, there's gonna be a polarizing effect of this book, and that isn't the worst thing. And this is a funny part. So this just happened. I was watching, I like Sia, which she's not Christian, but I think she's like, I really like her songs. And I was watching her video, the one with Shia LaBeouf is in it, and the little girl from Dance Moms. I don't watch Dance Moms, but I know what it is because my mom occasionally watches it. And I didn't know, but there was like this huge controversy over it because it came out a long time ago. And someone said, oh, watch this video about the making of it. And so I watched it. And in there, they were talking about how like people got like it got bad press because people thought it was this or that, and all these like negative opinions about it. And they thought that it was not appropriate because it had a little girl and a guy, but there was nothing there, but I guess some people were reading into it, and they're like, the premise was actually about werewolves fighting in a cage, which I didn't get that from either. I was like, that's super weird, because that's not what I would have ever thought that was the storyline of it. I thought it was a father and the daughter fighting, you know what I mean? That's what I thought it was. Yeah. But whatever the case, it was very powerful, and it does evoke emotion, but some people had were very upset with it. And the instructor of the girl got on, and this is the part where it comes back to my book. She said, well, here's the thing. She goes, good or bad, love it or hate it, at least people are talking about it. And I said, oh, well, that's my book. Love it or hate it, good or bad, people are at least talking about it. So they're talking about it, they're buying it. So I guess that's all I can hope for as a writer. I mean, so that's how I kind of it made me feel better. I was like, well, she's super famous and she's having, flack for something. She probably put it out, didn't think it was going to cause a problem, and it did. And so,
right.
that came out right at the same time as one of my first negative reviews. And there's only a handful, but still, it kind of made me feel better. I was like, well, that is kind of true. At least it would be worse if nobody was talking about it, nobody was buying it. So I guess there could be that. So
That's true. That's true. And what I would say is, you know, for the viewers who are watching it and readers, is I would say that for me, like, I loved the book up to this point. I loved the book after this point. So if this part really just grinds on you, or I don't know even what the word is, but just keep going, because it is so good in the end. I feel like you totally wrapped the series up well. I feel like Margaret really had this happy ending. I really loved where the characters ended up. And so, yeah, just, you know, sometimes you just grit your teeth and you get through it, and then it's great. It's worth it in the end. And that's how I felt when I finished your book, is I was like, oh, I'm having a hard time getting through this. I really am. But then once I did, it was so good. And that's why I said it's probably my favorite book. For that reason.
And it's still your favorite book, even though that was in there. And that's where I feel like I had this piece, is that I don't know. I think it's like, that's okay. I think sometimes it's okay to be uncomfortable. I think that we've gotten this mentality in our society where we feel like we have to be comfortable and make everyone feel comfortable all the time. And I'm not saying purposely do it, because, you know, I did not. I never told you, oh, I think my third book's going to make people uncomfortable. I never thought that.
You had no idea.
No, I was like all excited. I'm like, oh, everyone's going to get their happy ending. They're going to love this book. Like, it's going to do so good. Like, way better than the others. I thought it was going to double outsell all of them, right? And it's doing okay. It's doing as good, but it's definitely not, like, the response has been mixed. It's a mixed bag. Like, but it's still got 78% is 4 and 5 stars. And then other 10% is 3 stars. So it's less than like 15% that's negative. I feel like that's a pretty fair mark, because my father-in-law said it best, because they were down visiting, and he's like, you know, Jenna, you give your book to 10 people and not all 10 people are going to love it. He goes, there's probably going to at least be 2 or 3 like, it's not my cup of tea, or, oh, I really didn't like this and I didn't like that. He's like, this is, if it's 15%, that's a normal margin. So I was like, oh, that's kind of true. I never thought of it that way. And it really put it into perspective. So.
Absolutely. All right. Well, before we go, let's talk quickly about the other 2 things that we have coming up. So Jenna and I are both dabbling into the Kindle world, and we're both writing a novella for the First Street Christian Church Kindle world. I think I said that right. And have you started yours yet? Because I know you thought you were going to do contemporary, but now you've decided you're going to do historical. Correct?
I know I need to, because it's coming out in November. And the good thing is I'm a very fast writer, and so I'm not excessively worried about it. And I'm actually thinking about shelving book 4 right now and going and writing the novella, just to give myself, like, because I'm, like I told you, I'm kind of stuck. So I'm thinking, well, maybe if I go write something else for a while, but then I have to decide if I'm going to do historical or if I'm going to do contemporary, and I'm not really sure. Because I feel like I've built this momentum up as a historical writer, right? Because everybody knows it, and I'm really scared about, like, writing something, even though it's all romance and it's all Christian romance, which is a very small niche. To switch from one to the other, I'm like, I don't know. So I would like to test it out. So I don't know. I'm like 60-40. I'm going to do contemporary, I guess. So I don't know.
There are other historical novellas in the series. I know that, I think her name is Emily Woods. I think Emily Woods has one that came out in July's launch. And then I think she's doing one in November as well. And Pack Jack Carroll, I know she writes historicals as well. So it wouldn't be odd to have it in there. But you haven't started, and I have. And here's one thing that I have learned starting this Kindle World, because I hadn't read Kindle World. I had no idea what it was about. And I was like, oh yeah, this sounds really cool. So basically they take the story based on one author's book. And this one happened to be Melissa Storm's, that was set in Sweet Grove, Texas. And so Melissa has created the setting, and Melissa has created this canon of characters, and these canon of characters you can use, and you can use the setting that she's created. But then all these other authors get to come in and they get to write using the setting, and they're adding their own stuff in. And so for the July launch, I don't think it was quite as hard as it is for us in November, because now when I look at it, there's other things added onto the map, and I'm like, oh, I'll have my character go stay at the bed and breakfast. But then they told me, they're like, well, you can't talk about the the people at the bed and breakfast because that wasn't Melissa's canon. That was this other author's. And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to send my character to a bed and breakfast and be like the owner. Like, I can't write that way.
Yeah. The bellhop.
Yeah.
Like, so, nobody has a name in the entire book except for your main characters. That's
right.
Weird.
You can name Melissa's canon characters, but you can't use any other character from any of the other authors' books, which I haven't read any of them, mainly for that reason, because I didn't want to get into them and then be like, oh, I totally want to use this character. Wait, I can't. Because a few of us had talked about, we were all going to do based at this automotive, because my character is a female mechanic and a couple of other ones. So we were all going to have them be a family, and we had all been sharing ideas. And then Kendall was like, no, you can't do that. And we were like, wait, what? So that was really hard. And so I had to like kind of take a step back and pick this like corner of the map that didn't have anything. And I'm like, I'm sort of creating my own little part of Sweet Grove. And they'll come into town, but it's been a challenge. Like, actually,
I want to come to your little corner, but I can't, because if I do, I can't talk about any of your characters. So
no, you can't come to my corner, and it makes me
like, can we have our own written agreement that I can use yours and you can use mine, so that at least we have something? That just seems super odd to me too. I was like, when I saw the postings, and then you told me about it, I was very baffled by it too, because like I thought the same thing. I thought, oh, how cool it'd be. Like, you and I both love Gilmore Girls, so it'd be like if we were writing in the world of Gilmore Girls, how could you not write about the the characters there? That doesn't make any sense. Like the neighbors, you couldn't talk about Suki. That was super weird. Like, oh no, you could talk about Lorelai, you could talk about Rory, and
the cook. But you can't talk about her. And the other
produce husband.
Right. And I was like, as a reader, I wouldn't enjoy that. Like, yeah, I don't know. And then the other thing is, Melissa writes very different from you and I. And one thing when I finished her book is I got to the end and I was like, I missed some descriptions somewhere. Like, she goes into a lot of depth on other areas, but she's not a super descriptive of people and places. And so when I finished, I was like, I don't even know how to describe things in this town, because she didn't describe things in the town. Oh. And so I was like, huh. And
it's not do a lot of descriptions, so that's very polar opposite to us.
I know. And so I was like, I'm going to have to be okay with not doing as much description that I would normally do, because I was told by several literary agents, I can't see it enough. And so that became like a thing that I did, is whenever I go into a room, I close my eyes, I think about it, I describe it, or when I meet a person, I sort of like take little bits of, this is what I want the people to pick up from, of what they should see when they see my person. And so that's been really challenging. And I guess the nice part is it's only a novella, so it's going to be shorter, which is good, because there's a lot of stuff I can't describe. But yeah, so it's, I would say you probably should get started, because I thought, oh, I'll be able to kick this out in a couple of weeks. And no, it's taking me a little longer than that. But I think it's going to be fun.
I know what I'm doing tonight.
Yeah, it's super exciting, and I think it's going to be fantastic. And I'm actually reading Sharon Hewson's. She sent me her beta copy, so I'm reading Sharon Hewson's.
Oh, she sent me hers too.
Yeah. Yeah, Love's Late Arrival, and it's really good so far.
I've been out of town, though. In my defense, I've been gone a lot this summer. So
you have been. But I'm reading hers, and that's fine, because I have no plans to be near the high school at all. So I'm like, okay, this will work, because I can read hers and not feel like, oh, I want to use that character, but I can't. And she writes very different from Melissa as well. And so I'm like, okay, I'm starting to feel a little better about this, because I can see how she's incorporating herself into the town. And still using her own style. And I think that's what we'll have to do. And it's, I'm super glad that I did it, though, because it's kind of a challenge, and I wasn't expecting it to be as much of a challenge as it is. But it's kind of a challenge, because it's not the way I normally write, and it's not my setting, and I can't make up my own stuff as I go along. I have to follow like these certain guidelines, and, I keep pulling up the map again, and I'm like, wait, they have to walk down which street? What's the name of the street? And so
you're ahead of me. I haven't even looked at 100% at the map.
You have to find the map and bookmark it, because you will need it.
Like, uh-oh. Got some problems going on in there. Well, I asked one question and I couldn't get a definitive answer. You could probably answer this to me. I said, because if I do contemporary, I'm thinking of having her work at the hair salon, but I don't even know if there is a hair salon. And I asked, and then they like referred me to the map that I couldn't find. I was like, that's unhelpful. I don't know where the map is.
I haven't seen a hair salon on the map.
I get to create it. Woohoo!
I don't remember reading one in Melissa's book, but you have to ask, because if somebody else created one, then you can't create it.
What if they're in the same launch? Who gets rights to it? That's super weird.
You have to create it on like a different side of town or something. I don't know.
You have two hair salons in the same town that's small. I don't understand. Although I was in a really small town that was like a Swedish town and I saw 4 hair salons in it. It's like, this town's like 10,000 people. How could they have 4 hair salons? It's super weird. I was literally just there the other day. I'm not going to say where because I don't want to insult that town, but it was super weird because my daughter and I were joking. We're like, oh, let's name how many hair salons we see on the main street. Because it was very odd. It was a very small town. I was like, that's a lot of hair salons. Because like I always think of Still Magnolias, which I love. And in Still Magnolias, they just have like the one place. They have Trudy, right? You know, that's it. So I'm like, I don't understand where you could have a whole bunch of them, but I guess you got to do what you got to do. So
I played Trudy in high school.
No, because she can work at the hair salon. I just can't name any of the other people that are in there. Or I make up a new person, because I could just make up another hairstylist or a nail person that works there. That's what I'm going to do. I'll just make up my own people that work there.
I don't think you can do that.
You can use the places. You just can't use the names of the people.
Only if it's canon, though.
No, you can use the place no matter what. Canons are not private.
But I don't think you can create a character in someone's created place. Because I asked about that. I was like, okay, so could I just have...
We're getting arguments.
At this bed and breakfast? And they were like, no. And I was like, wait, what? Because that's what I was like, I'm not going to call him the owner. I can't do that. So, okay, I'll just create a part-time employee. And they were like, no, you can't do that. And I was like,
that's it. What? I'm just going to create a job for her that I know doesn't exist. Like, I'm going to look and see if there's a hairstylist place, and then my backup plan is going to be an art gallery. But I hope nobody sees this and steals them.
I don't think there's an art gallery.
The private ones, so no one takes the places I'm going to create.
Yeah, so it's really challenging.
I could just write a novella in like a different art gallery person. I'll just keep them all in the hair salon. Everything I write for the world.
Well, and
I just live in the hair salon.
You know, she's got more launches planned too. And I'm thinking, man, this is going to get harder as the launches go on. Like the next one, like feel like people are going to have to be like outside of Sweet Grove, and they're going to have to drive in and visit, because it's so hard to like.
Or Kindle's going to have to change their rules. There's a possibility, because it is such a new thing. They may end up being like, if there's agreements between authors, because I know that's probably what this is all about. Let's just be honest. It's the legality of it that people will fight over characters and stuff like that. But like if we had an actual legal binding agreement saying you and I could swap back and forth, I don't see why. So they may adjust it. I've seen things like that before where they'll adjust it. Hopefully. If not, we'll see what happens in 3 years, all right? If it's still going.
A challenge. But it's going to be fun. You guys are going to love it. And I don't know what Jenna's writing hers on about, but mine is going to be a female mechanic who the aspiring, well, he's a bestseller author, but he hasn't been able to put out a book lately. And he breaks down outside of Sweet Grove, and he's very chauvinistic. And the only mechanic that he's close to is this female mechanic. And I got to the point now where, because I couldn't use the bed and breakfast, I was like, okay, so where is this guy going to stay? So now I've made up this festival that's going to be there. That was the other thing, is you have to make sure that your festival doesn't coincide with anyone else's festival, because they don't want to have more than one festival in the town at the same time. And I was like, oh my gosh. But yeah, so there's a festival going on. And so all the places that he would normally stay are booked, and he ends up having to crash in her extra spare bedroom. And so I was like, okay, this kind of is like, brings in some tension too, which I think is going to work out well. But yeah, there's some, I did not know going in that I was going to have so many challenges. So I think you should definitely start soon.
I guess I know it'll be done in the next couple hours.
I know, right? Okay, and so the last thing, because we're running way over, but that's okay. I know the viewers will forgive us because we're so fun. But the last thing,
never ever let Jenna Brandt come on there again.
I know, right? So they'll be like, man, that woman is long-winded. No, it's partly me too. But Jenna and I have gotten together with, how many do we have now? 6 other? Are there 8 of us total?
Yeah, there's 8 of us total.
Okay, so 6 other Christian romance authors. And we're going to put out a Christmas anthology, which I am super excited about. And this was Jenna's idea. she, you know, was like, hey, we should totally do a Christian anthology. And I was like, oh, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
I
There's
did
not
do
a lot
some,
of them out there, so we need to start getting that ball rolling.
no, and we need to start getting it going. I think we've picked our cover designer, but we actually need to like get it
It hasn't
done. And
finalized, so we may have to find somebody else. Like, we'll figure that
Mhm.
out. But we know
Okay.
what we want. We have it all figured out. So we just got
we
to.
have we have great wheels turning in our author heads. It's going to be amazing, and yeah, it's going to be great. And I think the other 6 authors who are going to be with us are also fantastic. I know Alexa Verde is also in the Kindle world, so if you read some of Alexa's stuff, she's going to be on. And I think we have one other one who's in the Kindle world, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But yeah, so we've kind of all, you know, met, and this Christmas anthology is going to be fantastic. And I'm super excited because I now get to use one of my, Jenna and I joked about this when I was writing A Father's Love. I had the cover before I wrote the story because I had the story in my head and I was like, okay, so I had my cover designer create the cover. And then of course my cover designer quit working for Fiverr. And I went to write the story and it didn't work with the story title. And so I shelved it. And I went to write the story again and it didn't work with the story title. And that became When Love Returns. And I finally got the story for A Father's Love. And I had this first one that I had started, which was supposed to be A Father's Love and didn't work for A Father's Love. And Jenna read it. She was like, this would be great for your Christmas anthology. And I was like, oh, yay, I finally have a home for these, you know, it was almost 20,000 words. And I was like, what am I going to do with this?
You're ahead of me. You're already almost done with that one too.
I know. I
Keep
know.
on showing me, man.
Well, you write faster than I do. So I think in the end, we'll end up right at the same time because my writing time is like 9 to 11 o'clock at night before I pass out. And that's pretty much all I get. And once school starts, it's going to be even less than that because I'll have to be getting up early.
That's why you're getting it all done over the summer, huh? You're going to stockpile it all.
Yes. Because once I start teaching, then I'm going to be exhausted and I'll have to go to bed earlier. And then I don't know when I'm going to write. That'll be interesting. But yeah, so look for the Christmas anthology. I know, right?
Getting your lunch working.
Eating lunch. Yeah, before I pass out.
I'll skip lunch. I'll just work.
I only get 30 minutes. It's really hard to eat and write in 30 minutes.
30 minutes?
Yeah, teacher schedule. We only get what the kids get.
Huh. I taught, but I got longer than that. Maybe it's California. We're kind of loose over here.
Or your planning might have been backed up to your lunch.
No. My hour of planning was, well, it doesn't matter. We're getting into stuff that doesn't matter whatsoever, but
this is why we're long.
We'll talk about that later once we get done.
We will. But we have some great things coming for you. So make sure that you check out Jenna's Window to the Heart saga. I promise that you will love it. I was not a historical fiction reader when Jenna asked me to read her books. And I was like, oh, okay, I will read historical fiction because I like you. But I love her books. They're fantastic. And I don't know that I'll ever read another historical fiction if it's not Jenna's, but they're great. So I can highly, highly, highly recommend them. And then I don't know when her 4th book will come out, but I promise I'll let you know because it'll be worth it as well.
And for fall, I'm just gonna put it there because I like either late September, early October is the goal. So that's kind of what we're hoping for. So
we will look for that. I will have in the links above ways that you can get in touch with Jenna, including ways that you can be on her ARC team if you want to do like advanced reviews, on her street team, on her newsletter, because she does fantastic newsletters and sometimes she gives away really cool prizes. So you should definitely be involved in that. So make sure that you look above and then keep in touch with us because November 15th, I think, is when the Kindle World releases. And our anthology we've set for like the last week in November, right?
Yeah, we want to get it out before Thanksgiving so people can read it over the holidays. So
okay. So we've got lots of great stuff coming for you. And I promise that Jenna and I have creative minds that never sleep. And we will have much more coming your way. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you so much, Jenna, for being here. This was fantastic. And I know we went long, but thanks for staying with us. And we'll see all of you again right here next week on Write the World.